Good day, dear sirs and ladies. So the time is over. So it's time to start. So I offer you to start our work of our session that is very interesting, and it concerns directly the Ministry of Finance that hold this forum, and you had a lot of interesting information, and we will discuss about the market of state securities. And the problem is very actual, more than actual, and critically important for the Ministry of Finance. As you know, the epoch of over dividends is over, and now the budget will have his limits this year or the next. So from one part, it will be very interesting how to balance the income and expenses, and how to look for new sources of investment. And in the frame of this task, the development of our interior market is dependent from the development of our market of securities, and including different investors and with population's investments. We will discuss these problems during this discussion, and first I would like to introduce the participants of our discussion. Looking from the left and going further, I see Valery Zhondrov, the Minister of Finance of the Republic of Sakha. Then is Vladimir Yarovoy, is the Executive Director of the Department of Global Markets of then Vysokovsky, Director of the Department of Public Debt and Public Financial Assets of the Ministry of Finance. Then Sergei Dobroshevsky, Director of Research at the Gaidar Institute of Economic Policy, and from the Institute of Gaidar, and the last but not least is Alexei Klopkov, the President of the Non-Governmental Pension Fund from Khanty-Mansiysk. And at the end, we have the place for some person, for Sergei Shevtsov, the first Vice Director of the ministry, and he will join us later. And I would like to start our conversation from the problem of the development of the regional securities, because we have the situation that is a bit paradoxical. Our government and the state stimulated the regions to attract some commercial investments, loans, and from the 2012 and later to develop the social situation, but part of those debts was restructured and was exchanged to some budget loans that are cheaper, and the growth of the rate was very difficult and wasn't easy. So here we have the problem, because for many people, for owners, it's very difficult to go into the market, and the government can't help them, and the government that can direct some investment to the regions is not enough, and we don't have any additional resources, and we can't expect them. But the market of obligations in rubles grew from 400 million rubles to 600 million rubles, and now we have a lot of capabilities to attract those loans. So I would like to make the question to Valery Zhondrov, because this republic, Sakha, is one of the first who made an emission. The first emission was for ordering. The first emission was then for the stock exchange. We had 3 papers, 360 Tenka, Orenburg, of Orenburg region, and others. 97, 95, I don't remember those obligations. And now we have 15 obligations of the Republic. Is it difficult to be this kind of emissary? No, so it wasn't easy, because now, in any case, we have some standards. To make public offers, it's not very easy, but we tried to do it, to be present at the market of the capital. And after 98 and from the beginning of the year 2000, we renewed our work to maintain the possibility of public loans, and so we emitted. It was a very nice tool for our work, and we can say now that this kind of obligations of this tool of debt is out of any doubt, and it is efficient, and we try to be present at the market now. Our rating, according to the agency Fitch, was B minus the rating of the country. We try to maintain this rating, and you noticed correctly that it is difficult to maintain the level now because of the rating of Russian Federation, but we try to maintaining the public activity in the public financing. It is very interesting in the forming of our case, of our debt case. Is it difficult to go in for market now? Is the situation different than it was a year ago? Yes, you understand that after the 15th year, after the devaluation of the 2014, during the first quarter, when the regions went to some bank credits, loans, and to the summer, the investment market was open in comparison with the commercial bank market, investment market. So the regions in 15-16, it was a trend to make debts made loans from the borrowed money from the banks. And now the auctions from the banks are technologically is very costing, and it's easier to go to the stock exchange. And so we understand that the presence of our obligations with the terms, long terms of their existence, it is better. And this market is open now, and we can feel that the insufficient amount of obligations in the market, because the demand for 7 years, as we emitted, the demand was very high. But demand is changing. Maybe we have some new investors. No, the emission of the obligations is very different from the bank loans, because it can attract a very wide range of investors, and so the rate can be higher or lower in this case, because the range of investors that invest into our entities is very wide, and we don't feel any deficit in placement of our emissions. Well, but looking to the pension funds, to the statistics, the percentage is higher this year. Maybe you can answer like as a person who make emissions. Why it is so? Yes, of course, the banks, insurance companies, and others, they play a very important role in the market. They have some declarations, and they can invest. And our rating lets us develop our emissions. And next question would be to Alexei. You represent the group of investors who are in the market of the obligations, play a very important role, but not the decisive role, because the main part of the obligations are in the hands of the commercial banks. But we have some trend now that MPF and other banks and central bank will make some limits for these investments, and maybe we have some more motives to invest into these sectors. Could you explain us with more details what investment strategies do investors have now? First, I would like to greet all the people here and to thank them, because we are here on Friday and after lunch, and I can say that our hall is half full and half empty, and I would like to think that people won't waste their time here. We invest very much into the national state securities, and during many years we make the same strategy that is very simple, that we have rolled down with a dividend of for 4 years, when the duration is limited to 1 year, so we have the premium for risks very low, and we have some additional income, 1 or 2%. That is, its strategy is very primitive. But now the situation changed, as the market is expecting new lowering down of the rate, and so we have some concave situation in the graphic, and long-term obligations have more income. So this strategy is less attractive, and we look for some new strategies to improve our income. So we can change federal emissions to regional emissions, to Khanty-Mansiysk, for example. But then we saw some conflict of interests, because we are from there, and we were very sorry to sell our bonds of our region, because being in the region, we understand the situation in the region. And we understand that 1 or 2% of risks, and everything is clear for us. Concerning other papers, we have a very interesting problem. It's not the deficit of liquidity. The emission of 5-10 billions is very high for the demand to make the strategy roll down when you make more the term of time for the obligation roll down. When people buy these securities from the Republic of Sakha, so they wait till their cancellation. Of course, MPF and other emissions are bought by the banks, but who more buys these bonds? MPFs, banks, people. What's the reason for the banks to buy it? Because they can, they can do it at the basement of, as a reason of the budgeting. Well, the main share is for commercial banks. They make difference in their cases, portfolios, and so they dilute their cases with these obligations. And they have these assets because the amortization of the debt is long enough, but the liquidity is a very high problem. Serious problem. In the year 2005-2006, we had problems of the buyback, but now it is difficult to make the same operation of buyback. And the banks keep the federal obligations till the cancellation. There are not many private people in Tomsk region. They have a very nice experience of the emission. And when they had the experience of emission of paper obligations, so they had a very, it was successful. Yes, of course, there are some investment companies that offer the tools, and of course it's not a secret that the bonds can be in the like a pill of security for the central bank, like deposit there. So it is the possibility to tell about the position from the 13th of July of this year. The situation changed with the federal law and federal guarantees. So it is very interesting because the ratings now of Fitch and are lower, and we know two examples when we have the risk that the risks the rating to some federal obligations are lower than for the state deposit, and it is very dangerous because in this case the range of people to buy will be narrower. Yes, we will touch it at the end because we know the decision of this agency is some kind of trigger for leaving for the backflow of money from our country, and it deserves some special discussion. Well, so the rates are going down. So, and what would you prefer in the actual situation to have more credit risks, or you try to keep the situation expecting the lowering of the rates? Unfortunately, now the case our portfolio is lower. We don't have enough obligations, and we look for alternatives. So it's a point of looking for new strategies, new ideas, and it is historically that our funds don't invest into bonds. But pension funds in foreign countries, for example, in Norway, they invest into such obligations, and so state pension funds, because of their limits, can't buy such bonds, and it's part of the problem, and it is necessary to solve those problems because they have long money.
And they actually have to invest into long-term projects in our package of state papers. That's about 2-year papers, and historically we have been investing in foreign markets because there were expectations that the interest rate will go down and the profitability will go down, and basically we had about 40-45% in the portfolio of government papers and the federal papers, and about 30% are still kept there. The share is increasing owing to the efforts undertaken by the Bank of Russia. Therefore, we are at the point of quest, and the strategy in papers does not work easily and objectively. If you look at the inflation of about 4% and profitability of securities about 7%, 6%, it's a good profitability, positive profitability. However, people and general public do not take it that way, and when it's about 7% is there, then the population would not see profitability 5 to 6 as a good profitability. They would expect a higher profitability. So we are between the hammer and the anvil, and our customers, and they expect a higher profitability where they see the fear to go into the stock. So But I do hope that you will overcome your problems and your customers, future pensioners will meet their old age with dignity. In addition to the issue of reduction of interest rate with respect to deposits, and they're not seriously considering 5 to 6% as attractive for them. In the meantime, we are now at a point in time where, when it seems to me, the population are reconsidering whether they want to keep their funds, because when the interest rates are dropping and the drop in the deposits and population and the private individuals, they began to look at where else they could invest their funds, where they could make more money, considering that for many years Russia was under the conditions when all the interest rates were double digital, so to say, and 6% is less interesting for them. So demand and supply this issue, and the Ministry of Finance had an interesting experience. They allocated office there for population. It was the first big project on the part of the Ministry of Finance, and proposing papers for the population, securities for the population. I want to ask Vladimir Yarovoy, allocation in general, was it successful? Did you have a serious demand? Did you had any complexity or some other overtones? Indeed, it was an interesting experience for us, and for the bit 24 too. So long as the customer, Ministry of Finance, they asked us to make the procedure as simple as possible for rank and file investor that wanted to acquire papers. We wanted to solve this problem within the shortest possible period of time, and the promotional campaign was quite short, and the demand of the population for such securities was stable, for such bonds was stable, and the second tranche was we completed either this or next week, and if you look at the numbers for the first tranche, it amounted to 9.45 billion, and the Sberbank share was 2.2, and so the 15 billion tranches that we had. And I want to know that the people have need when there is a deposit and the substitution of deposits at the higher rates, which they regard as comfortable when they were above 10%. Now Sberbank cannot provide such interest rate, and the customers are asking for what else can the bank offer. And in our situation, we offer offer for the population, and so long as they are attractive and there is a premium, then in this situation people normally choose this kind of a tool, and they rely on it for the long-term investment. And we analyzed most of the medium-sized investor, and at this point in time it's a kind of retail investment, we would call it, and normally it's the premium segment customers, and with serious accumulations of their accounts amounting to several million rubles. What is interesting for us is an interesting experience. Is first of all, when we could offer this, we were selling it through the Premier network, which didn't have any mass segment for the customers with the assets in excess of 2 million rubles. And the second interesting experience for us was that we offered and sold in coordination with the Ministry of Finance through the broker accounts. And we had some apprehension at the time that opening of broker accounts and brokers itself could be linked with various operations at the exchange, and it could be difficult to purchase them. And to me, the issue was it all depended not very much on the absence or presence of the broker account, but today the Sberbank online service, they have been using it for over 25 million persons. Let's call it Sberbank Online. That's what we have. That's a customer or commercial bank. We have about 80 million accounts open in the Sberbank, and about 35 million of them are using the services of the bank, online experiences, the service of the bank. And the trend today is that in this 35%, over half of them are the customers that are using mobile application, mobile apps. And as Sberbank, we see it as an opportunity for us to sell investment tools using online channels for the customers who need to take part in the allocation or placement of their papers from the Ministry of Finance, and also placement of papers through the stock exchange, which is a classical method, and also the other papers that Sberbank certainly has been issuing and will continue to issue. And I believe that this year we will have an additional issue of securities that we will offer to the population as bonds. And one more question to you. You said that on the average it's $1 million growth check. It's quite well-to-do individuals, and they're close to qualified customers. But the purpose, that is to offer more profitable products, or probably a broad spectrum. And the central bank today is the requirements to the qualification of investors, and on the property threshold, based on property threshold. So in the brokerage channel, we are trying to profile the customers and to determine, depending on their attitude toward risk, within the legislation, we are offering various, and subsequently this federal loan bonds. It's quite a good attraction. It's good attraction for them, and their sale is possible to anyone. Let me ask. I want to ask people for the hall. Anybody here bought any federal loan bond? And you said the purpose was to simplify the process. Is this possible? That is, those federal bonds for the population. So you recommend that they be so that's an average value, whatever it is. I would actually say that we are still on that way, and we are further simplifying it. Now, Konstantin, your impression as a borrower, are you happy with the first placement of the bonds? Did you yourself buy any? But we cannot buy. We are not permitted to buy them. Neither can I. So it's I cannot buy either. So it's Alexander. Thank you. I believe that after several months have passed, the implementation of this project, we can say that it has succeeded, and we also can say that we can affirm that whoever expected us to so quickly allocate or to place and attract various assets through the allocation of replacement of new bonds, and the first 15 billion within 26 working days have been allocated, although initially planned only 2 issues per year. And indeed, as has already been said, the second issue has been completely allocated. Next week we will offer to citizens a new issue, and we proceed from the premise that this tool has to be proposed to the investors on a permanent basis, and we do not want to have any time frame restrictions and in offering this tool. And it is also important, the peculiarity of this instrument or tool is that it's a ban for the secondary revolvement. So it's when you have similar in risk market bonds, this premium at this point amounts to 50 points. And I like to emphasize that it's also in taking account all the banking interest rate, and it is 50% higher than 3-year-old bonds. So otherwise, we are not prepared to show such an approach, because this is quite expensive instrument for the Russian budget, and we already have. We are now trying to reduce the amount of the bonus, and I can tell you frankly, we actually wanted in the third issue to not to offer this bonus, and we did find a compromise. We chose a compromise variant. We reduced the bonus to 30 points, and we have not eliminated it completely, for the reason that there was a serious drop of profitability in the market, and we did not want to have such a drastic reduction of profits or revenues rather, and we also believe that in the near future the profitability will need to level on market instruments, and will have to be maintained. We'll have to maintain the same level. It's been the peculiarity of the first stage, of stage one, and we proceed from the premise that the tools have succeeded, and there is a high awareness of this tool, and also through the promotional campaign. If you ask me what has been done wrong, we probably should have paid more attention to the promotional campaign, and probably should have been promoting the instrument for broader public. However, we believe that this tool is well known. There is a stabilized demand for this instrument. It's about 150 million rubles, which is the volume of daily sales, and we figure that it will be maintained in some stable level. And as regards the buyers, indeed, currently this is not exactly the target audience that this instrument is aimed at. And what is your target audience? It's mainly are the citizens who do not possess any special knowledge in the sphere of securities market, who are not prepared to assume market risks upon themselves, but in the meantime who are willing to invest their savings into some alternative instruments, alternative bank deposits, alternative to traditional saving instruments, and that they're prepared to take a long term, but they are not ready to take such a risk, to assume such a risk that needs to be understood. Talking about the average check, we can say that it's fairly high, and that's another confirmation of the fact that the securities are mainly purchased by the investors who understand the markets, and it is apparent that they apparently understand that it's highly interesting and highly attractive that's an attractive product for investment, and this is one of the most interesting product from the point of view of this risk versus profitability ratio. And I have stock exchange data. You mentioned the MySex, and there were several thousands of customers who have come to the MySex in order to buy those instruments, and about 80% of those people are brand new customers, and it goes to confirm the fact that for certain reasons that we already have achieved. That is a certain new segment of the investor basis, and meantime, it's not a solution of the ambitious tasks that we have set before ourselves. It's increase of financial sort of awareness of the population, and we have spoken many times. We've said many times that such tasks cannot be resolved overnight, and it's a long-term and a consistent effort, and we want to offer this instrument to the citizens on a permanent basis. Then I believe that we have to think about a good promotional campaign, because Valeria, I wanted to ask you too. You mentioned that you also had experience of sort of allocation of stock among the population, of bonds among the population. So long as they have the same rating, the sovereign. Suppose you want to collect all the demand. It was a long time. It was a long time ago. It was in 1995, and it was interesting at that point in time. It was basically the bonds payable to the bearer, and the experience of the Minister of Finance. It has been discussed for some time. The approach to renew in the new format loans from the population. We do have this pre-revolutionary and after the revolution, and there is also an attempt undertaken to come back to the same experience under market conditions, not the same as it used to be with our grandfathers, but it's very expensive. It requires some expense, and we believe that it requires quite a lot of funds to be invested. Talking about the costs and when you have to issue and allocate, and to banks have assumed upon the responsibility in the first experience. It goes high expenditures, and the basis, even if this experience in Hunter-Banksisk it still shows that they still tend to purchase the papers which are well known to them, of which they are aware, and so it's quite difficult to locate them in the region, because the basis would be quite low and the costs would be too high for the issue, and they will not be justified. And in the Tomsk region, they have already got used to it, and for the population of their region, it works, and that they issue.
They make issues of their obligation through the banks, and individuals got accustomed to such trading, and so as I saw the development of such economic influence to it, so we have different products, some federal papers. Of course, we can make some advertisement, some videos as usual, and we can do it. And it will be quite complicated for the regions, and making issues of their regional obligations. Since 15 years, they haven't done anything in this sphere, and they don't have experience with the federal securities. So we have some things to stimulate their demand. What's the task, the goal of the financing for the population, for the papers of issue papers for the population? But for example, if the bank sells through the market, so it is for rich people, and they are educated enough. So because they bought some federal papers. But we think that this project is successful because the bank can educate people. The project is 0.5% more expensive than other obligations, but for long-term goals, what's the best for this project? We can ask the Sberbank. For example, we had the session, and German Osipovich said that the future, when we won't need instructors and mediators if the bank issues papers for people For the premier, yes, it is some kind of income, some kind of revenue, but for regional banks, it's not good enough. And if we extend it to other banks, so it will be difficult for them. Well, as I'm a moderator, I will answer to your second question, because I have a ready answer. Look, please, because you are right that for the banks in medium term we have quite difficult future, and the competitors will be not only from the state with obligations, from other tools, financial tools. And from one hand, you are right that Sberbank, yes, can earn from the issue of such papers, but the trend has a lot of risks for our bank system, Russian bank system, and so I wouldn't make this question so that makes the competition to the Sberbank, because people will look for new opportunities to earn more. We can remember the experience of the Italian banks when they had some lowdown of their banks, so they had some structure changes when the private capital is protected and the income is protected only with the tool. But the first question is to Konstantin, not to me. What's the success? The criteria of the success of this tool is the main criterion, and it is only one, and it is evident, is to make popular this to make this product popular. I don't think that Sberbank sells it through his system Premier, and it can embarrass us. Any people, any individual can buy such obligation through one agent or through other agent. Now we spoke a lot about this tool, that it is expensive for the emittent and for agents. Yes, actually, the work with the individuals that are not qualified investors is more complicated. So, since now we've chosen the tools that the bank had. But we don't have any limitations in attracting such tools by not customers of the bank. We don't have any problem, and so we would like to make this tool popular. The average of investment should go down, will go down. We can talk a lot, and we did it many times, that this tool and this structure, all these elements, it is very difficult to come to the conclusion what should be the structure of this tool. We studied the world experience, and now it seems to us that the structure that we elected is the best, and we can explain any element of our tool. And I'd like to say that the subjects and the regions can repeat our experience and offer people their own tools of their own. Yes, we greet it, and we have first applications from the regions to register their issues. They are coming, and it's very pleasant for us, but we will occupy a very strict position, an attentive position, and we will register such loans, not issues, not only according to some general indicators, but according to, we will see the structure of the issue that the regions offer, because it will be more difficult to register such loans in the bank, because if the subject with the issue of such a tool only wants to solve the problem of the budget, so it will be better to issue some some simple market papers. But if he wants to make some papers for the population, so they should take into account many things to the structure and about the placement, about the turnover, about the trading in the market. And so it seems to us that the pattern that we worked out is the optimum. And if we have some suggestions to improve it, so we will make changes. But till now, we think that the regions should use correctly the experience of the Ministry of Finance of the Russian Federation. So we think that the implementation of the education. So I'm one of the lost bank society. So it's not a question to the Ministry of Economy, but it's some macroeconomical problem. We have 70% of our national product manufactured in the public sector. We don't have investment in the market, and with the hard currency growing, so we don't have reserves, and we should earn money. But the trend is very clear. The sources for liquidity for private banks are under the question more and more, and so I can swear that the majority of them have such problems. We remember the event that took place. Maybe it's a separate story, but it's an event for the banks of the sector where they can use their liquidity and attract liquidity. So when Minfin make issues of papers for the population, so for the ministry, it's a problem to discuss, but it's evident that, as we saw, that we have some kind of competition for banks, small banks of the private sector that are still in the market, and they show that Russia is still a market country. So we have some restrictions in the legislation. We face some blacklists, some requirements for pension funds when they place their money. And of course, it's not the last restriction for the bank sector. So I don't think that somebody intentionally making issues for the people tries to make the life of the bank society more complicated, or somehow wants to take into account their own interests. But I would like that at a macroeconomic level, at the government level, Minfin market level, and others, they and I heard some words from them that the keeping of, maybe from Nabiulina, the conservation of our bank system is a main trend for her, but we should see some actions in this way, and some conciliating notes. So we feel some menace. Not because we are bad, not all of us are very bad, but we thought to have some not rated income and profit and we have some competitors, and the situation for private banks is becoming more and more tough. And I think that here we don't have some kind of just competition in the area. But we discuss the state market of state obligations. Minfin can do what they want. But what do you think? It would be better to issue papers that we know the federal obligations that are necessary for the bank system and for the market, and the volume that they emitted for individuals is not scaring, but I evoke the Ministry of Finance and other institutions interested in the case. When they plan some actions, they should take into account that we have still market economy, and they are not alone on the market. And there are some banks of the private banks, and they have their rights to compete in the market. I would like to ask Dobrozhevsky about obligations for individuals, and from the point of view of the fundamental, can we see that it can cover the deficit in the budget? So is it good or bad for it, or is some kind of a toy? From my point of view, of course, we can see seriously for the economy private investment like a resource for the budgeting, if it is for some current expenses or attracting some budget money for some projects. It's something exotic. But historically, it was done during some wars or some kind of such events. So I think that better, if we say about the financing of the budget, we should see that it should take into account only individuals. But we have some peculiarities of the development of our market when the deposits dominate. The second is of saving. In comparison with any other countries, is hard currency, and then the presence of our people in the finance market is very poor. And so from one point, our state securities are very safe from the point of view of the population, but other tools that we have are comfortable or not comfortable for placement, for buying. It's some kind of maybe some educative measure for the population, because to show them that we have some opportunities to get income instead of depositing in the deposits of the bank and the buying the currency. Can we make a question? Zibarev, Septem Capital, one of left private companies. We created the mobile application for buying obligations, youngest. Can we make some obligations popular for obligations and to sell them through internet, electronic, and it will be cheaper than to do it from the operator in the bank. It was very difficult to sell obligations during first days of the issue. People waited. So I would like to change your question from not why but when. So yes, we will push the Ministry of Finance to the correct solution. And the second, when you will make wider the list of the agents, bank agents, 2 or 3 banks is nice, but there are some more banks in our country. Well, the answer to the first question, it is done, and if you like, a citizen will see will look to the internet, you will see that you can do it through internet, and so those QS show that people didn't know about that. And the second, we don't think that this list should be widened. It's too big system-forming banks with a lot of networks, trading networks. It's better for them. It's easier for them to sell the product for the wide people, to the wide layers of people. And now let's go back from the private financing and let's go to some bigger problems of the national investors who are the key persons on the state debt and counter agent of the ministry. Do you plan some innovations for obligations? Maybe you would like to issue some new tools for institutional entities. No, I can't make any sensation. While we are speaking about the same initiatives, as we told before, it is there's a possibility to borrow in Chinese currency. It is in the agenda, this question. We don't take it out. It's and we work on it intensively. So some questions we solve. Some problems are in the process of the solution. We needed some more explanations from the Chinese part. We did something here. But speaking about this topic, if the Ministry of Finance is ready to sell this idea to practice, will be any
external borrowings of the Russian Federation. Could be borrowings in Chinese currency, although it would be federal law bonds and yuans, but the budgetary, it's otherwise will be considered as external borrowings. So, though we never considered that source as the principal source of financial budget deficit and the external market. We apply to the external market for different purposes. That is to maintain our presence there, for establishing for corporate borrowers all the requisite guidelines for the cost of borrowings, and otherwise the means in foreign currency, even in US dollars. Say nothing about yuan's federal budget to this channel are not needed. And in Russian economy, as you would also know, the imbalance is in such a state as foreign currency comes to the Russian Federation through different channels, and our borrowings at external markets even add burden of pressure on the exchange rate of national currency. So coming back to the issue of yuans, my answer is very simple. We can do it, provided we clearly understand that Russian corporations have a clear requirement for the attraction of resources in that currency, in yuans, and many companies are looking toward the east, and this cooperation is ongoing, and there may be such a requirement. And the subject of implementation of it would be like that. So yeah, probably technically we can issue such papers. We are the high degree of issuance of such securities. However, it's an issue of normative basis. They have been covered and everything is ready for that. In other words, the next step would be the marketing steps, the meeting with investors and discussion of the financial parameters and that is to determine the most optimal moment for coming to the market. So otherwise the requirement that kind of resource for the Russian operators follows the same logic as the federal bonds for the population. If you have to do it, we have to do it on a permanent basis. We have to maintain liquidity of that instrument, and we should not only speak about single time allocation, especially because with a certain politicized aspect based on various negotiations to just make a single time operation, we will suddenly be looking at that as a new source of funds for the Russian corporate borrowers. So, Konstantin, you can see that our market holds big opportunities for the corporations in order to help corporations to blaze the trail to the Chinese market. Finn can sort of sacrifice some of its priorities and borrow money in Chinese yuans. Anyway, it could be viewed as a source of risk as much as the source of opportunities. And I want to ask you, you're a well-known specialist on this issue, is it more a risk than an opportunity today? If I try to describe to you what we feel is going on in China in terms of investments, I would say that the volume of the accumulated for investments, it's $1,600 billion, and they are receiving upon that over 3% of the interest rates, annual interest rates. So the direct investments amounts to about $1,400 billion in the year 2016. They invested over $150 billion. And most of this money went to the U.S. and accumulated the aggregate investment amounted about $45 billion, of which most of them went to the fuel and energy power production segment. Chinese, their massive investments into China in the U.S. is fairly cold today. There are statements made that Chinese investors have to be compelled to observe law and the business ethics and culture is considerably different. As a distraction, I can tell you we have it's an intensive day that we have had. I can give an example of not really China, but it would be Southeast Asia, the year 2009 or 2008. And when we had this terrible crisis, I was working in the VTV at this time, and I was meeting with Barclays, a well-known bank, as you would appreciate, and before that, working in one of the major Japanese bank, and we were discussing the financial situation in the area, and he said, "Have you ever met or worked with Japanese?" He asked me. I said, "No, I never did that. I never worked with Japanese, but I met with South Koreans." He said, with quite a bit of tragedy in his voice, "I don't understand how they take decisions. The decision-making logic is I tell them that it's very, very expensive asset, that they buy it, and enormous quality. They say don't sell it because it is at the bottom, and they're selling it at that point in time." So, as Kipling had to say once, East and West and West, and they should never meet. And so it's quite difficult from that point of view, because these are closed civilizations, and they have original kinds of behavior. And I read a book about the Chinese economic ideas, economic behavior, and I could not understand whether they are proponents of state economy or state-regulated economy, because you can find many Confucius followers, and there would be a certain various things which are completely contradictory to one another. So it's in the year 2000. 2017, the Chinese government, they called on applying the brakes and to slow down, and slow down in China occurred because of the in terms of construction works in the U.S. They were buying various commercial property. I'm talking about real estate. So when they were told to apply the brakes in the year 2015, the volume of Chinese investments amounted to $10 billion, which was 10 times smaller than that 1 years ago, and they had very peculiar relations, and they are paracyclical, and when the cycle glows, they put the pedal to the floor, and when the cycle changes by the danger of inflation, they would apply the brakes, and they could go through the windshield. And so this economy, from my perspective, if you look at it superficially, it was a repetition of the Chinese story, and the super liquid banks on the one hand, and major big enough in their assets and throughout the world. And as I remember, there were 3 of Chinese banks, and they have not had a big expansion abroad, the same as Japanese. But you know the outcome of that expansion for Japan, and the bubbles have exploded, and there was a standstill, and they were curtailing their investment. But Chinese, in the meantime, were significantly different in several respects from Korea and from Japan, which makes it difficult for us to understand what's going to happen with them in the future, on top of their absolutely terrible statistics. And I try to monitor the macroeconomy in China, and it gives me the signals that I really am scratching my head trying to understand what's going on. BMI, for this matter, is industrial. It shows significant positive values, whereas industrial production is growing about 5 to 6%, and the production of power, supply, and heat, thermal energy, has leaped up. That the Chinese GDP has to grow at the rate similar to the beginning of the years 2000, but it's growing at the rate of about 6 to 7%. But the colossal number of external savings, which amounts to about 50% of the GDP, the $30 trillion, they really can easily invest into their own needs. So they do not have to attract any funds from abroad, because they have a lot of their own. And the second thing, that in China, up to now, they have about 100 million. I do not exactly remember the number, but it's the error from 100 to 200 million citizens are planning to be resettled into the cities. It's further urbanization. And this is sort of a prerequisite of further growth, economic growth, and in China, whatever percentage it would be. And on the other hand, they have an enormous bloating debt and debt bubble, and whatever they possess today, this MPL, and it's about 10% altogether, and nobody believes in it. However, they have carried out modeling, and everything is quiet in that sense, and the modeling was carried out. It was Barclays or Goldman Sachs probably did that, another major investment bank, and or it was Standard & Poor's. And they said that if 20% of the Chinese credits of the banking system are idle, that would amount to about potentially they'll amount to about $1.3 trillion, and even 60% of them would have to be written off, and this means that you'd have attract about $7 or $8 billion to preserve the banking system in China, and they can attract this money even today without touching the capital, because their revenues amounted to $14 billion plus the reserves that they had done before against their assets. Otherwise, if you look at that economy through the prism of a pessimist, through the lens of a pessimist, you can see an explosion in 2-3 years, an explosion of credit bubble. But if you look at it with its peculiarities, owing to its behavior and scale and scope and their sort of predilection to savings, and I would believe that in the near soon we'll find not really great for about 2 or 3 years Chinese market. It's an opportunity for Russian companies if they really can carry on for the next years. And still, I would not say so. What we are doing in China today, we work in China and we are working fruitfully. It is trade and but no sooner do we have to attract any facilities, then we have to come to a brick wall, and they did not want to deal with us. And I have a differentiated approach to the Russian companies and Chinese economy. First of all, to export something to China other than raw materials is a great problem, and I don't believe it's realistic. And the other thing is that Chinese heads of state, they can change their policy one way or the other depending on their own problems, which to them are not clearly understood, which is another regulatory risk to be considered. And secondly, I can also give many other reasons. It's not certain El Dorado, and it's a giant market. And although I cannot say that it's completely promising to us, and they not want to invite everybody to rush into it. Now, there was one more question that we wanted to, speaking about the macroeconomic topic, I want to ask you a question. Nikolai said that, this big bubble is expanding, and suppose new problems occur, what is going to happen with this inflated or superinflated bubble? Would it begin to deflate, or how they could be different for Russian economy, and how seriously can it reflect on the state debt? Because as we know, the share of state debt is over 30%, and there were big problems in China. And this redistribution of capital, some of the investors would have to leave Russian debt market, and as we would also know, quite a lot of Asian investors already are investing into ruble securities, into ruble-covered bonds. I would attribute myself to the experts who have an optimistic view of Chinese economy, and I believe that it is not 2 to 3, it's up to 5 years. We can say that the Chinese economy has all the reserves required for the growth, and owing to many reasons. There is also a Japanese scenario, and it is unlikely that it can happen to China as regards various threats or risks for Russia, for Russian economy. I would gather that for us it would be a certain risk as a possibility of a problem in the Chinese financial segment. Otherwise, it could be, in fact, the very growth of Chinese economy, because we today can see that along with the development of Chinese economy, in reality, the demand for the Russian wares is not growing, rather it's dwindling, it's ebbing down, and what we can observe today, we can observe a certain increase of Russian goods export to China, especially the raw materials, but we also can say that in reality China is filling the pause, otherwise filling the gap, kind of, until or unless they begin to develop the same production of those raw materials. And because China has plenty of its own mineral resources, and they can extract them and they can utilize them. And I believe that essentially to believe that the development of China and growth of Chinese economy, it's good for Russian economy, and that China is a reliable partner that can also help us to grow owing to the export. I think it's baseless and makes no sense to count on that, because this it contains a lot of risk. And if China follows along the negative scenario, and there would be a further scale and scope of the financial crisis will increase in this case, I believe that the biggest problem, should it reflect on Russia, it will not be connected with how closely we are tied with the Chinese economy, or you have borrowings in yuan, loans in yuan, and this sort of a shock. It's about 20% of the world economy today that it amounts to in Russian currency, in Russian financial assets, as well as the assets of the developing economy would be considered by many investors a high-risk investment, and we will rather be fallen under the overall decrease of attractiveness rather, and it would not be predicated on any specific risks, because we are Russia, and because we have certain relations, special relations with China, but as Konstantina had to say, so long as we speak about the borrowings in yuan would not be a strategic path to follow, but it would be a rather an experiment and a possible loan in order to show the world that the benchmark for our private borrowers, and up to now, as long as we can see that the time for such an allocation has not yet come, then it apparently has to do with the fact that the private borrowers, in spite of a great number of speculations on that topic, are not ready to come massively to the Chinese market. So from my point of view, should we proceed from the development of the situation at this point in time, and what kind of the prevailing trends at this point in time, then I say that we don't see any specific risks for Russia in case of special problems. In China, I don't see them.
It's some part of some global and not local trend, and some changes of such level at the global level, but it seems to me that our hopes in the development of our relations with China are in risky zone. It's evident that any instability in China influences the market of raw materials. That's the effect of the second level. If in China we have some slowdown or some fall, so it influence to the price of the fuel, of the oil, and so we are the subject of such influences. Yes, of course, these are global risks, but not related to our policy of borrowings. Well, as I think our initiatives to attract money in yuan, it have some pluses and some minuses. Well, we have some favorite points. It's the lowering, reduction of risks, of course, because theoretically we can be cut from dollars, euro, and so yuan. Many people try to do it. So we would like to decrease such risks. So I think that it's maybe only one risk. And which are the minuses? At first, it's something exotic to borrow in yuan because it is very expensive. It is expensive because all the world borrows in dollars, and they can swim in dollars. They can wash in dollars because this is the United States. They share their dollars with all the world, and so when China has more than $1 trillion of dollars in state securities of the USA, so they had to do it. They don't have any other way to develop the economy, and we all keep China, Europe, we keep our money in dollars because we have to do it, or our economy will stop. So all the world is overwashed with dollars, and so if we want to borrow in euro, it's more expensive than in dollars, and yuans, it is more expensive than in dollars too. Yes, we can make some factoring operations, but it's difficult. And in China, they like investments, and they keep their money out of the country. And so they they require money. So if we come, we will borrow a lot. And the second bonus, these are expenditures, because the market is not developed. We are some kind of importer. We don't have any hedge of the growing of the yuan rate compared with the dollar, and we have only some kind of balance in our importation exportation, and so we can keep our obligations. So for me, it is a venture project, and from the point of view of the economy, I don't see any sense in it. Well, in Chinese, some words about the Chinese rates. Deposits in China are for 1% rate, and host management product, the shadow bank system. I agree that is has less liquidity, so the borrowings are more expensive, and macroeconomic details are not of value here. Russian Unity of Constructors. My name is Shota Khabilashvili. I head of the Association of Constructing Companies. Putin, in one of his speeches, marked the problem of the capital repairs, major repairs, and 1 billion of our housing require repairs, capital repairs, major repairs. But we can do 60 million square meters per year, so it could last centuries. But in Eastern Europe, in Eastern Germany, they do it in several years. But we don't have enough money. We can make only 50% for the money that we have, but we need 200 square meters, is to say 4 times more. We should repair. For example, if I say, if the region issue some special obligations, especially for the major repairing, is the Ministry of Finance support these issues? What measures should be done to support it? It is some kind of returned money, because in 20 years or in 2 years, in the region or in some region, they will make the repairs, and in 20 years they will have some money from the population. So it's a returnable money, and we have some multiplication effect here that can bring not bad income for not only for states but for the region too. We have 40 kopecks of taxes, and the state can receive in the nearest 5 years, for example, with 8%, they will have that money in the first year. So the question is, what should the region do, and what should be the conditions to make the issue of such obligations with your support? 2 words more, and we will have some social effect because the major repairs will be done in 2 years and not in 20 years. So if I understood the question well, what should we do to register the obligations related to the major repairs? And how the regional entities can participate in it? The answer is very easy, but you won't like it. The Russian legislation of budgeting forbids some kind of targeted borrowings. We have the borrowings related to the expenses. So such kind of borrowing can be done according to the legislation that we have, but if the region consider that the financing should be done, so they can issue some ordinary papers and to finance some with the income, with the profit, some special, so targeted, it doesn't work here. Well, I don't mean targeted, I want to solve the problem. Well, we are limited in time, so we will discuss after our session. So we have only maybe 5 or 6 minutes, and before we will ask the whole, and I would like our participants answer the question in one phrase. Well, give a good advice, a good piece of advice to the ministry. How to develop the market of state securities, like the part of sub-federal. So at first, to make the unification of the registering procedure, but the system is arranged, and not in 30 but in 15 days we can analyze this. We should formalize the application and make it annually, and every region shouldn't do it separately, but we can do it in general. To eliminate the procedure of the FZ 44, we make some competition of stock exchange, and we can, according to FZ 44, we make a contract with the depository. So this list of our administration limits scare people to participate. Well, about the experience you've made, and we can use it, and more advertisement. Well, I expressed my fantastic desire to join the departments, to join some authorities, not to make narrower the market of the state papers, and make the possibility for private investors to participate in the market. So we should support the private banking sector. Okay, the development the market of securities can be done only if we issue them, and if we can issue them only in the situation when we have some deficit of the regional budgets. So the development of this market is related to such policy like that plans to make some deficit, not menacing the macroeconomical stability. Alexei, not menacing the stability. And you, like an investor, My opinion is that parting from the level of our economy, the market of securities, state securities is very advanced. So I can't advise to the ministry. Maybe some details. Maybe we need more liquidity. Maybe less issues. Maybe more diversity. Maybe variety. Maybe link it to the inflation, maybe some strategy to some papers that are related to the inflation and to hedge the risks. We understand that inflation will grow up 14%, everyone. Well, I don't think so. So many people in our country have such a fear. I agree with you. But the economy should grow. Everybody that every world grows 3.5%, United States 3%, China 2.5%, and we only less than 2%. So we can answer 2 or 3 questions from the public. Raise your hands if you are ready to ask. Another Shota, please, through the micro. So I have the same question to you. What would you recommend to the region that doesn't have such a big rating? Well, Konstantin Ryzhkovsky answered the question like a regulator of the state obligations. The general legislation doesn't permit to do it, but in some regions we can we can spend your money into those works, but then to report it later. It's not very difficult. So if in your expenditures you have it, so it will go to the center of the financing. Just to accelerate and to make some issue, only the participants of the market can do it. And we offer the mechanism how to register the issue and how to do it. The region won't be able to do it. No matter they have a higher rating. Yes, that's a point of view from the regions. Of course, we have such a problem. The volume of housing in emergency. We have billions of square meters of such housing. So, and we couldn't find any economical model to solve the problem on base of some market principles. It doesn't exist. Just to repair all the housing fund in emergency, it will take us years, many years, and we can say a miracle. Well, the profitability of such projects will be 20 or 30 years. So the market, with the coordination of risk and profitability, you won't be able to finance it. We don't have any solution for that. Including all the multiplying and other effects. Well, I think it's some kind of a special topic. So I would like to resume and to make some conclusion of our discussion. It's clear that we develop the market of state securities, but for investors it's not the easiest time because traditional approaches doesn't work already, and so rates go down and they won't go up so actively as before. And we would like to find some new ways for investment and new strategies of investments. We can see that we have a separate idea is how to see the private banking, because I don't think that in future that it will develop a very fast, and so the ideas in this situation, not ordinary situation, I mean, the Ministry of Finance makes a lot, and they make some issues for people, for common people, some issues with the yuans, and the economy of yuan, we understand, is a risky factor, and I think that the Ministry of Finance won't lose it, won't miss it, and I would like to, to wish the Ministry of Finance to accept and approve our proposals. Thank you.
Неужели?